Hey guys, it's Alexander Williamson here with The Secret History Living Inside Your Aquarium. I just wanted to show you guys an update on the angelfish and their fry. So these are in the downstairs 40 breeder tank. We've got the blue, the Turkish blue angelfish, which is from Aquatic Arts. And in this light you can't see the blue super well, but she's very blue. And then we've got the striped Scalare, bronze striped Scalare with the blue accents. And right now, they're eating, but they're also collecting their babies because, see this? They're putting them in their mouth because they're afraid that the other fish during feeding time are going to eat them. Now, they're still learning, and because of this, they're not always the best at collecting fry without eating them. They accidentally do eat some of their young. However, if we watch when this is the father, he's going to eat them or put them in his mouth, and then hopefully he'll collect them like this, and then we'll see him spit them out, probably on a leaf or in an area where he thinks it's safer. So let's watch for a sec. He's got a little pouch in his throat that allows him to kind of store them there. But they have to learn how to do this, and so I just wanted to, there you go, so then they come back out there, and he's collecting anyone that's on the margin where it could get eaten, basically. She's supposed to be doing the same thing, but she's a little more lazy. This is probably their best batch yet of fry, and I'm really trying to encourage them to be able to take care of their own fry without me raising them. So these ones I didn't hatch out. I've just been working. It's the 6th attempt. So I guess if at first you don't succeed, have 6 more batches of 100 babies to play with, or something like that. I don't think CPS would be too happy with those odds. But in any case, this is how things are going in here. I'm just, the babies now can eat. I've been giving them vinegar eels because they can easily eat those. They can eat baby brine shrimp, and they can pretty much eat even just crushed food. That's what you're seeing floating in the water, and then there's some algae on the side of the water. They don't have that angelfish shape at all yet, but they do have the eyes and the kind of color markings. Some of them even have some little kind of stripe patterns on their tail. They have these big eyes and this kind of rounded head, and all of them have their eggs, yolk sacs are gone, and some of them are kind of getting that, there's a fin on the underside that kind of starts to get elongated from the belly back to the tail. And so it's really interesting to watch this happen because it's when you watch a fish being born and you see it when it's young, there's an interesting phenomena that goes on, and other fish actually will use this biological evolutionary adaptation to actually prosper in hard situations in the wild. And that is, so when you watch a fish being born, they start as an embryo, an egg, and then they end up growing into a little larval type thing, which is just a spinal cord, eyes, and a head kind of, and then they get a stomach and some basic digestive and nervous system tract stuff. And then from there you start seeing fins growing. They're kind of have, almost all fish have this tadpole or sperm-like little shape. But then they grow into their unique morphology, their unique shapes. And angelfish are obviously a very, very unique shape. And so it's really cool to watch because you can actually see, in this phenomena, you can see how these fish evolved. So before they looked like angelfish, somewhere in their ancestry they looked like these little guys, and we're talking a billion years ago probably. But to me that's really fascinating. And then as they get older, they will start to add on traits that happened in their evolution later. So you can actually kind of scroll through evolution with fish And you can kind of do this with humans and mammals. So we actually have a process in utero where you can see that we have, for instance, a tailbone, and we have like a slight tail that used to be there, and we have the same number of digits in our hand as like a horse does in its hoof. But when a horse is in an embryo, you can actually make out each one of those digits before it fuses into that hoof shape. It still has 5 bones that have either fused or gotten so small that they've moved and shifted around and they're not even recognizable. And so I just think it's really interesting that in fish, because they do have eggs, I mean, they do come from eggs, but you can see whether it's like a labyrinth fish or an interesting shaped, just physically fish, or if it has a trait, like in the labyrinth fish, if it's able to breathe gulps of air, a lot of times those traits will be former evolutionary traits, and you can figure out which one happened in what order by watching the fry. And actually, there are some fish even, so like the erythromicron or the emerald dwarf rasboras, that when they got stuck, when they were in the Lake Inle region, and the lake was closed off to any sort of new fish and things because of mountain mudslides and possibly, who knows, glaciers or just earthquakes and things over the eons, they get trapped in there, and they actually revert back. And so a lot of fish species, and like pup fish in the desert too, they can decide, okay, well, we're just going to grow up X amount. We didn't need these traits, but for instance, maybe when they're in this form, they can get more oxygen from diluted water or something like that. And so they will stay in a pre-puberty or however you want to say it, an underdeveloped state. And that can actually then, through a thing called epigenetics, which we can talk about in its whole own video, that is a marker genetically that then can be flicked on, and you end up with fish like these ones over here that actually will stay with traits, even though they had evolved to be these large carps. They stay smaller. That's how we can get things like dwarfism sometimes, or you get a pygmy line of fish. Happens on islands frequently. You can also get island gigantism, or you can also get, the shrinking down of species. So that's a whole other thing. But these striped fish here, the erythromicrons, they actually come from a common ancestor with danios that have a lot more developed traits, in the sense of they're similar to like trouts and carp and more hardy fish, but they didn't need to fully mature in that water, and so they just left the markers genetically as if they didn't need to complete the last few stages of dealing with salinity and things, because it just wasn't a factor that they needed to grow into. And I just think that's very interesting that, so say here's a baby one, that they are able to figure that out by which ones survive. It of course has to mature to the point of being able to, fish have a different way of going through puberty than humans and mammals, but it's of course has to develop enough that it can reproduce and all that. But it is interesting to know that things like gills or extra fins or having less fins or whatever it may be, eyesight, like in cave species, can be totally gone, and it can be due to these things. So that's why I think it's really interesting to watch young fish, to watch them grow. You can see it as they develop, the traits that they evolved through. And they actually, in embryos in the lab, they've been able to, with chickens for instance, turn on the epigenetic tags that are responsible for teeth or for scales rather than feathers. And that's all still hidden within their genes, because they evolved in sequence from those creatures at one point. They were a reptile, they were a little dinosaur, the chickens were. And so they're able to turn those things on. Well, nature has a similar thing, and there's different names for it, but pedology or there's a few different names for it, with the root of pedo, usually Greek for child or young, and it's those traits when they turn on that have different effects. So sometimes you can spot them, and I think that I learn a little bit every time I get a new species, and I look at how they grow. So I look at, for instance, we've got right here we've got a little baddis, but we've got corydoras. So the corydoras, we've got more baddis down here too. Oh good, they all hatched. I hadn't seen them for a while, so I'm happy that occurred. But you can see the corydoras, their markings, the color. A lot of times they have markings that are different, and then you can find their nearest ancestors, and those young will also have the same kind of markings. So I just think that's really fascinating. Things like the barbels, when those evolve, the whiskers, really early, then you can guess that that's been a system of sight or navigating for a really long time in their species. And so I just think that all of that is fascinating, and I encourage you to check out any juvenile fish you have, and if they have any special traits, like they can breathe gulps of air, like labyrinth fish, like bettas and things, or they have a spawning color that they go through, things like that. I encourage you to check out what those adaptations are, and to try to watch for when they grow up to a size where they can use that to their advantage, or if they do or don't. And some species, if it's like a brackish water species, they may only utilize certain traits and evolutionary changes when they're in brackish water, when they're in salt water, for instance. Maybe their barbels will be longer, or in unclear or cloudy water, they'll have armor on them. They'll have stronger armoring, like sticklebacks do in North America, and even more spines and things like that. So I highly encourage you guys to check out some of your juvenile fish, and just see what's going on in their little world, and watch how they develop. It's really interesting. And it tells you a lot about how they evolved, and we're only unlocking the secrets of this very recently. So this is a very new field of epigenetics. But I will talk to you guys later. This has been The Secret History, living in your aquarium, and I encourage you guys to take care of your critters, the people around you, and take care of yourself too. Otherwise you can't take care of the people and the critters if you're not taken care of. So I think if half of us did half of those things, our world would be twice as good. And if you believe those things, and you are interested in learning more about the secrets living in your aquariums, well, why don't you go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you feel like I've earned it. If not, maybe tune in another time, give it another shot, and see if something else tickles your fancy. If you need help with the problem, there's over 500 videos in the archive now. So yeah, check it out. And if you really want to support the school of ever-evolving fish and different creatures that I'm always breeding and researching and breeding and reading about, then you can also check me out on Patreon, or check out the artwork I've created on shirts on Teespring. So I will talk to y'all later, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye. Remember your inner child and your tail. Bye-bye.